I just want to share with you some of the struggles that I had in academic research and to hear what you think. I think one peculiar condition under which we are carrying out our academic research is what I call the kind of time-space fragmentation in knowledge production. So when we do research, time and space are both fragmented in the sense where in the relation between the theory that we use, the empirical phenomenon that we observe, the place where we write up, and the place and the venues that we will present that work. Theories are often generated in the West, English-speaking countries, probably from the most of them have the roots in the 19th century. Then probably have a big leap developed after the 1960s and the 1990s. And for people like me from the global South, what we look at is the condition in China, India, and other parts of the world. And then we write up in a university setting, wherever we are working. By the way, when we present, we will go back to places that are often dominated by Western discourse of research. So this is not to say anything is wrong, but the problem is that the theory we learn and the thing we wanted to analyze, and in the end, the audience we wanted to present, they're all quite different. They're all quite different. So this creates a number of problems and probably also opportunities for innovation as well. I don't know. And one example now comes to my mind, which will help to demonstrate the possible pitfalls as a result of such space-time fragmentation in knowledge production is the case of transnational. We can go back to the question why in 1990 transnationalism became such a popular framework in migration studies. I mean, we know migration study is one of the fastest growing fields in social sciences. In social sciences, we innovate. In crisis, look at funding and etc. But certainly, migration studies is not in crisis, right? You have a huge number of people rush there and well-funded. And then within migration studies, I would say the transnational framework is the defining paradigm, the most popular one, most recognizable one. And the whole idea is to move away from assimilation and integration assumptions and look at the transnational connections and activities as a domain of its own right, and methodologically and also politically, want to move away from so-called methodological nationalism, and also in terms of policy discussion, this paradigm emphasizes that solutions must come from the transnational domain. Global problems need global solutions. That is a standard line. So that is the transnationalism paradigm, and I should emphasize that we should not forget it does have this paradigm has an implicit, not anti, but a critical stance towards Marxism. I say so because the Marxist analysis has always been transnational. It's the whole capitalism is by definition global and transnational. I mean, the Lenin analysis and also the analysis of revolution, basically say, not have a national revolution by definition transnational. And then you have a world system theory, etc. And then why did we need a transnational? In 1990, something very new. I mean, there was a number of reasons because of the end of the Cold War, and then at that time, there is a sense of, bit of like now, kind of disorientation. Early 1990s, you have this Rwanda genocide, and this widespread ethnic conflict across the world as a result of the war, and then the loss of sense of ideology, loss of sense of faith in socialism as a viable political solution. And all this create an atmosphere that we need a new language to look at the world, and the transnationalism differs from earlier Marxist analysis in that transnationalism emphasizes kind of bottom-up, people's connections, ideas, circulations, rather than the structural conditions. They try to say, oh, there is no clear direction, we don't know where we're going to. But let's look at such a domain, such a site where people develop transnational connections as a place where social reform can be experimented. So that is the idea of transnational. Then it became very popular for all these historical reasons. Then I look at, how this paradigm travels across the world. As you can see, it is a very Western. So we start with a concern of assimilation. Why should the Global South worry? They wanted to critique assimilation. I mean, the Global South should do the opposite, critique the lack of assimilation, right? The proper treatment of migrants. But according to the West, they want to say, oh, the idea of assimilation is a wrong, the integration based on certain biased assumption about coherence of national society, etc. But it's all valid in that context. But anyway, now look at the case that I'm familiar with, which is China and to some extent the Indian world. You can see that transnationalism has also been picked up in academic writing. In terms of number, I have not done any research to look at the statistics, but it is mentioned, at least in passing, very, very frequently in academic publication. I'm hastening to emphasize, but without much traction in the public debates, it remains a kind of academic, sometimes decorative. I'm just putting titles and people make it work recognizable, and you can go into the kind of circulation of language. In a way, it is a kind of self-evident. China has a long history of emigration, and overseas Chinese communities, or so-called Chinese diaspora, is an archetypical diasporic group in the world. And then it also has a long history for China to engage with its Chinese diaspora. So therefore, transnationalism had been practiced for a long time. And the Chinese government, the communist Chinese government, set up the overseas Chinese commissions at the highest level of the government from the 1950s. And it was, but a few years ago, it was now integrated into the United Front ministry. In a way, actually made it kind of more closely tied to the party organ. The United Front ministry is not a part of the state council, it is a part of the central committee of the CCP, the party. So it means that actually the state is investing a lot in this transnationalism program. And then we know in 2001, so they also in a more policy and applied arena. So the government also proposed the idea of transnational mode of engagement instead of encouraging overseas Chinese students to return to China to serve the motherland. As they say, let's try all kinds of ways that will help you to serve the motherland without returning. So all that, then it of course make the transnationalism empirically very fitting to describe the situation. But what is a bit of puzzling, and I would say slightly disturbing even, is that a very few research critically analyze the historical and the political context of how transnationalism has been practiced in China. And we know transnationalism in China historically has been a very important part of the project of nation building. The whole idea that the transnational connections are important? Is because they're important for nation building project. Right, and then this diaspora engagement was very much promoted in the 1930s during the Japanese invasion, because it's all about the motherland salvation. Historic. And number two, now if you look at how Chinese transnationalism is being developed, it is primarily a state project. So it's inseparable from nation building historically and state building contemporary. But that the part was not teased out, then you come to a result that the use of transnationalism in academic research is all very descriptive. And of course, you can find endless examples of transnational connection, how you make a phone call and Skype, etc., remit money and the time difference and the transnational household. I mean, this is kind of, I think it's post-1990s social science research, as Ravel mentioned, kind of a social science research becomes so empiricist. And it is almost lost the soul. I mean, we don't know why people describe all the things endlessly. All the description are fine. I mean, it's what is happening. But why do we describe it? They describe it for what purpose? I mean, it's very often unclear to me. But anyway, we have to publish it. We know why people describe it, because we just have generally more publications. But so but that's fine, that is such a thing called the field or profession. People do their job, and all the bankers also keep books and purpose for doing that either. So why don't we write a different type of books? But then there's a more serious point is that there has a political implication. When we don't fully understand the relation between nation building and the transnational connections and the state strategies from the global south point of view, actually we may be contributing to some rather undesirable political consequences. And I mean, the most obvious one is the rise of aggressive nationalism, meaning that it's not a nationalism that make you just be proud of being a Chinese or Indian or Hungarian, but you want to make a statement to say, all the rest are rubbish or wrong. So only my way is correct. So it gives me moral ground to denounce other people, even if and this is why aggressive nationalism rise at this moment of history, precisely because it is a very transnational phenomenon. So this aggressive right-wing nationalism is a result of global circulation of ideas and transnational related. So if we don't tease that out, then the writing of transnational connection may feed into this new understanding of the nation. I mean, example again, because it's for my own culture, society, I feel more liberated to cite negative example. I mean, lots of writing about the Chinese diaspora under the rubric of transnationalism, but very quickly it comes to the point, why Chinese culture is so wonderful. Keep everyone loyal to the Chinese culture. And then they try to come up with some state policy recommendation, how the state should do better to keep this transnationalism in a particular way in order to serve the state strategies. So it's very different from the original transnationalism paradigm, which is meant to frame ourselves from nation-state framework. And now transnationalism become a tool to serve a quite culturally essentialized notion of nation, and quite just a state as a kind of a power play instrument, like a Valiant understanding of the state. So I don't want to make any connection between the academic research and the kind of, I think it's a Western paranoia about the so-called sharp power of the Chinese government. You have students in Australia and serving as a foot soldier for the Chinese state agenda. I cannot assess that kind of claim at all. But I must say that implicitly, probably certain academic writing did contribute that kind of environment under which the so-called sharp power could be developed. So it is then you also look at. So that is a kind of if we were not careful about the. I mean, there's other example. I think in the West probably also have similar problems. Yesterday also. Ravo mentioned, the Estonia has very few foreigners, but has quite obvious foreigner issues, right? We know in Hungary and Poland, there are more anti-migrants than migrants. So then I was wondering, is that because of this transnationalism discourse create a distorted image about the world, the society, that as a national community is losing control, especially for the people disenfranchised. So present the transnational forces as something so powerful, and then make these people feel scared. And also must say that another problem we have to face in social science today is a kind of we may call the scissors movement. Again, transnationalism studies and migration studies, they often use very progressive and even militant language, left-leaning, justice, rights, open borders. But the reality is moving exactly the opposite. So you can be as left as progressive as you want in your publication, but the world is moving in the direction. And that is a very serious problem. It's not because the world is wrong, but it means we are losing our own ground. And that way of writing probably makes the left, the originally progressive ideas, lost the credibility. And people think you are just crazy. It's a group of really academics writing for their own entertainment. It's not addressing the issue here grounded in life. So that says kind of so what I want to say is that there's nothing wrong in any, the particular theory is wrong or method is wrong, but the question is the fragmentation of space and time, because the theory, why it originated, that time and space, and the problem here now, and I as a researcher come in, who I am, and then how do I present my work to whom, and etc. is a very fragmented. There is no organic connection. For me, it is a problem. Especially you see so many global South scholars come to West in order to learn particular language to present their observations. I mean, frankly, it's quite distorted. It's a huge waste. So now I wanted to think what can we do as a way to address such a time-space fragmentation in knowledge production, and I propose this two-way problematization. Maybe it's too details. I don't know what I probably just very quick outline. I'm running out of time, so it's a half of chocolate. It's gone, so I should. I want to finish my presentation before the chocolate is gone, so I can skill. So I just wanted to review what I have experienced. All what I said is a kind of sense of problematic of the current knowledge production is something very new, is what I see now after 20, 30 years of research on migration and looking back. And when I started, I did not have this feeling at all. And then when I started, so I went basically two modes of problematization. Problematization of theories, as well as the problematization of what I know already, my observations. So the two stages, I just put this forward to see what you think. The first stage is I call it a contrastive problematization. That is a very standard way for students like me from the global South, contrastive. Basically, you try to contrast your own observation to to establish the popular theory than to say, oh, my case is different, so therefore this theory is not complete, needed to be further developed. And then the second stage, I experimented with what I call the incorporative problematization. So the point is not to say the theory itself is wrong or not, but they try to go back to the original time and the space. So when that theory was proposed, what was the purpose, what that group of people were really thinking about, what they were worried about when they proposed the theory, and then what I am worried. So then you make it, try to make a conversation very selectively, and then you realize, oh God, their problems and my problem are completely different, but nevertheless, there's something can be learned. So then you incorporate. I mean, it's a kind of, again, dialectics. You have the contradiction. They try come to. You want to come with some resolution, right? Resolution which is beyond the both. Then you put the both in a larger framework. So how to do that? And so that is the practical process. I think is interesting. Yeah, I think that's important. Important is also I'm slightly frustrated with this decolonization stuff. I mean, decolonization, all the Western man, white people are wrong, and etc. And I don't know why that is interesting. To be serious, I don't know why. I mean, when Indian, the Chinese, the Brazilian, or from Estonia, we have a long civilization, a very rich life. And a couple of white men made a mistake. So what? And they made a huge contribution as well in documenting the things spent all life. Why don't we learn from them? Why do we denounce them? And then your decolonization is very much focused on the theory, the language. You try to break down the theory. I mean, I don't think that will lead us. And the most important thing is that how we can make use of theory in our own way, here and now. So it is more about the practical processes of reinterpret theories and to give a new life to the old theories, rather than to say, oh, well, they suppressed us for too long. And they have not. Partly is because China was never really colonized. I don't feel so surprised. I know. Because the problem is the opposite. We don't have enough strong resources for local civilization. That is. I mean, that lack of the local discourse is not the result. I mean, I don't blame Western scholars for being too strong. It's we have to work hard to catch up. They have to be deconstructed. But anyway, so this is why I feel they kind of the practical processes of knowledge production, thinking, writing, more interesting than the kind of forensic or discursive analysis or deconstructive analysis of theory. Yeah, very briefly, when I finished my PhD, so therefore I think the kind of biographical reflection for me is important. I very much want to encourage everybody to do that. In our writing, we can become more lively, bringing ourselves into that. And we know, academic research is a very contingent, like artistic production. I mean, we come across a question and we became interested in theory due to many factors. It's not a rational design. So, but this factor for me is very interesting. This is a real processes how ideas were born, how we made a mistake in understanding and how to correct ourselves, etc. So then, very simple. Why I became interested in migration for different reasons. But at the stage one, after I finished my PhD, and then the transnationalism was the most popular paradigm. I mean, it's the obvious framework that I will hang myself to in order to make quick publication, etc. Very straightforward. I didn't see problematic at all at that time. As a young people, I mean, you want to stay only in the West and etc. I mean, you are willing to sell yourself to them. This language, and you don't feel you're selling out because go to conferences, read all the academic writing, look so serious, so you feel they are very right, they are critical, they are bring a better future. So I throw myself into that, and then you see some bit of I feel uneasy. Oh, the true and okay. So then global South, why are they so they are methodological nationalistic? I mean, then I can see the meaning of nationalism can be very different for people, again, in Chinese and in India and China. You have to be methodological nationalistic because, I mean, the biggest problem is to build a nation. I mean, people in Afghanistan have, by definition, have to be methodological nationalistic. So the meaning of a nation is very different from the nation being criticized by Northern scholars in the 1990s. Right? So for the people in the global South, the nation is the only way to form certain public will in a global stage in a viable way. The alternative, the religious organization, etc. So I see that kind of, I feel uneasy, but I cannot articulate that. So what I did was kind of to do contrastive problematization. Look at just my case, the labor migration from Northeast China to Japan, South Korea, and Singapore, and to say, oh, it's different. The migrants, the transnational connections hardly mattered. That is the empirical observation. The migrants are very transnational, and to keep all this, the social media widely used already in the 2000s when I started my field work. But you can see the transnational networks do not affect their lives to a great extent too. But how they migrate and how they work, how they live, are very much pre-programmed by the system in which the commercial intermediaries play a key role. So then I say, oh, the commercial intermediaries, they are kind of a shadow state or state in the mirror, and etc. So try to make it contrasted, just to say the theory has a limit. And then after a while, you hit the wall. What else can you say? If you say, oh, that theory is limited and the Chinese state is very powerful, and everyone knows that. So what is the new problematic? What is worth further thinking about? Then it's mainly through actually academic exchange. The new angle, so-called materialism, also the emphasis on mediation and influenced by Latour and etc. Made me think more about the very detailed processes of how the migration process is being brokered. And then I see, okay, probably the situation is a little more complicated. Then I thought, the Chinese state is powerful, yes, but why and how it become powerful in the transnational processes, migration management. And also then I'm start thinking, okay, probably there is some point in the transnationalism paradigm. There must be some reason. At that time, people raise that issue. And very quickly, I become more appreciating of the critique of methodological nationalism, particularly on the point that the Weimar and the Nina Schiller said, actually, methodological nationalism is not to say the nation state are not only making the point that nation state are natural, given, and very important. It also means methodological nationalism also means that they forget nation formation itself is a transnational process. That is very true. That is very true. Because we know all these fathers of nation states in the global South, Gandhi, Nehru, Lee Kuan Yew, Sun Yat-sen, and all these people are completely transnational. They're very, very familiar with the global situation. They are migrants themselves. Gandhi's entire idea of nationhood was developed when he was in South Africa. Nehru is eminently familiar with the British system, culture. But it is through transnational encountering developed the idea of nation. So therefore, the point is not to throw away the nation altogether, but to look at the historicity of the nation through the transnational angle. So then it become more appreciative of the theory, and at the same time also become more nuanced in interpreting my own material. For example, I discovered that the intermediaries are very powerful, and they're powerful is really both kind of transnational and national. The intermediaries are powerful because they have these transnational connections. But then the way they materialize their power is by going back to the nation, by controlling the migrants. So the intermediaries use their transnational connections with intermediaries and employers overseas, number one. And number two, the relation between intermediaries and the migrant workers, non-migrant workers are their kind of clients who are using their service to be centralized. That kind of the contract, etc., is always nationally bounded. Use that to exercise its power to control migrants, to extract money, rent from migrants as a main profit. So then, so I developed, you want to use the notion of the scale to describe all this. Probably this is kind of not so important today for today's discussion. But basically, the idea of scale is that there's a scope of coordination. Like your migrants, you have lots of transnational networks, but they do not matter because that kind of connections, information flow, do not form a scale, does not form a scope with which you can mobilize resources, you can coordinate, and so therefore you can take some meaningful actions. You can keep contact with the families, etc. And then you look at Amazon, you look at the Facebook, you look at the eBay. No asset, very few buildings. I mean, the physical asset is, I mean, the material asset is a very minimum. But why are they so powerful? Because they have the global scale of coordination, and they have the global scale of operation. And of course, this scale has a material basis. There's cloud or computer networks and all that. But the point here is that the scope of coordination will give you extra capacity of action. So then the scale can be transnational, but then it does not mean the larger the scale, the more powerful you are. So the scale must be also coordinated with established power relations. So migrants in the transnational networks looks very widespread, etc., but is not really empowering because it never becomes scale. The reason it does not become scale because it is controlled, conditioned by the commercial intermediaries, transnational connections, and their scale of operation. Then what is their original scale, and etc. So it goes to the relation between the national and the transnational. That is a kind of a minor point now. But then so that is my biggest, my struggle so far. I mean, it's not very too interesting to myself, is because that is still a very academic process. As I said, moving from contrastive is problematization started with a kind of very instrumental calculation of having a job, etc. And then you move on to more incorporative, it's based on the sense of dissatisfaction of your own thinking, and also pick up new so-called theories and etc. But it's never driven by any big concerns or worries in the real life. So that is something I hope that I will be able to do, and very much hope that the social science will become more like that, driven by real worries, real concerns. But nevertheless, I think the notion of scale and the kind of how to look at the process as a multi-scalar configuration, at least to help us to understand how the national and the transnational intersect with each other, which is not surprising, but to probably give us some hints to understand the current dilemmas about how state power, particular type of state power, can be reinforced through transnational processes, and how we should differentiate some transnational processes which is not terribly consequential, and others can be consequential but can be very oppressive rather than liberating. So probably give us some tool to make critical assessment of human experiences, or rather empirical data. I mean, this is another quite problem. I have a problem, so we face is that after reading lots of academic writings, we don't know how to assess politically. I mean, there is something interesting there. People exercise the agency, people negotiate this, and people navigate that. What does it really mean for our life now? It is always a hanging. I mean, I don't think that there will be a solution to the question. People say that it is a purpose of academic research. We just document and because we cannot jump to any assessment. But anyway, I feel that at least if we have some language, some framework, which is more useful for making assessment, if some person wanted to assessment, I think that is probably important. So finally, since we open up to this level, I mean, I'm also in constant struggle. Now, my latest struggle is what is the department, Max Planck Institute of Social Anthropology should do? I mean, that is my new job. Very curiously, I say, okay, I mean, I can't articulate. I say, I wanted to make anthropology useful. And this is mean nothing for people who are outside the anthropology. People say, you do research, it must be useful. And I say, I want to be useful, and I want to provide some language, some insights that the people in the public can use to understand their life. So then you can speak to them. You do a research not to address a theoretical, scholarly question. You want to develop a research to address the people's worries, like young people that feel so much pressure in life. So what is pressure mean? What does pressure mean? That is cannot be addressed by the established theoretical language. The pressure is many facets, but it's a very real problem. It's vague, but it's real. So it's worth addressing. But when I say that, people say, no, you should not say that. It sounds so elitist and patronizing. How dare you say you want it to be useful? So that is the state of anthropology. You're not supposed to say, I want to be useful. You just say, we are useless, and we come here and extract data and write out. That's it. This is, I mean, we are humble, we are progressive, we are terribly worried about can't sleep in the night, but we can't be useful. And if we say, I mean, that's happened to me at least 4 or 5 times. I want to put on this line, and I want to make it anthropology useful, and people can use to understand life. Our public communication officer, the very, very supportive person, said, no, we cannot put this on the website. It will be attacked. It's too arrogant, too patronizing. And then the website, I have everyone said no. So I don't know. I don't know now. I don't know what the language I should say, because I do feel that I wanted to. And also another expression I use that we wanted to give back insights that our subject group found useful. They say no, you cannot say. How dare you say you want to give back insights? So that's no, among anthropology, that is a mindset. That's a mindset. But anyway, so I mean, I mean, maybe it's very honest, because for the current mode of research that has created a situation there's an answer to give that. So they say it's true. You don't pretend. if you want to stay in this field anthropology, there is nothing to do back. But maybe that's a good advice. But anyway, so the whole thing is that now the scale and this kind of two-way problematization, thinking of time, space, fragmentation in knowledge production, is to say, okay, we cannot to be useful, but then directly, whether or not we can develop a certain concept that can be indirectly useful in case someone voluntarily with the full consent wanted to make use of. And so I thought that kind of the scale and thinking, yeah, you think back, what's the origin of the theory? What is the local situation now and here? And that could create some knowledge that can be potentially useful. So I will stop here. Thank you.